everyone. Welcome to this new episode of our Student Spotlight series, where we are able to showcase some of the work our past students have done. I'm Charlotte, one of the outreach coordinators here at CCIR, and it's our pleasure today to have Laila with us, who did our one-on-one mentorship. So firstly, can you just give us an introduction? So tell us who you are, where you're from, and what made you seek out CCIR.
Hello, my name is Laila Al Sakka. Currently, I've graduated from high school in Dubai in the UAE. Um, but while I was performing this research mentorship, it was during my first year of grade 11. So kind of during my sophomore and senior year, it took me across this journey and helped develop, I think, my skills, especially in terms of research and writing. And I guess what I've started off with kind of the idea when I was talking to the professor with what I wanted to write about and kind of the topic of research, we had the idea specifically about focusing on diasporas and diasporic studies because we knew that, or I guess personally, we had both had experiences based on that and knew that we wanted to, I guess, focus on that as a topic.
Okay, great. And then can you give us a little bit more detail of what you looked into, what interested you in taking that topic, or sorry, in choosing that topic?
Sure. So I think personally as Palestinian, but as someone who has dual citizenship in the US and Canada, so two separate countries, I find that um like I can recognize kind of the experiences of living in the diaspora because I am one of those individuals. So I we focused more about um, younger individuals and how they use technology as well to interact with culture within the diaspora because I knew that personally that was one of my main methods of communication in terms of culture, in terms of our traditions. And I found that in the world that we live in, especially as technology is very important and prevalent in society, using it to further cultural communication and to ensure that, I guess, essential parts of your homeland or your country or culture that is very strong and fully ingrained into your families continues to be, I guess, relevant in today's modern society.
Nice. And obviously you have, a lot of personal experience with the subject. Did you have any formal experience with the subject either in school or in kind of any personal learning beforehand?
Honestly, within school, we never really explored the ideas of diasporas, but but for example, living in a country which has a lot of expats, I knew a lot of me and a lot of my peers could relate to that. So personally, I think it was grade 10, I conducted a personal project about tatreez, the traditional Palestinian embroidery. And I created my own piece and researched more about the historical motifs, the importance of them, kind of the histories behind them, which are very rich, but aspects that a lot of younger individuals like me just wouldn't know about because everything that we consume, such as our media, our books, literature, everything like that, doesn't really include historical aspects um, like our culture or in ways that are easily, I think, digestible for younger individuals. So that small project that I did, the writing and the actual embroidery work, kind of really widened my interest about culture and about kind of reconnecting with it. So that's why when I applied to CCIR, I knew that I wanted to do something that I think made me stand out, but that people like me could relate to as well.
That's very nice. And then can you walk us through what your research methods and process were for your research paper? So what type of research did you conduct? What was the process of finding data and analyzing it?
I know that we took a lot of like different sources for our information. Like personally, I've come into contact with a lot of different websites, for example, that shared, for example, embroidery motifs or um, Instagram like accounts or YouTube accounts, kind of informal sources that you could find firsthand information from. But also there's a lot of information that I took from, for example, novels and older literature, or even like research that has been written more presently that talks a bit more about the, I think, older concepts to do with diasporas and culture and understanding. But I ensured, or me and my mentor ensured that we mixed that in with a lot of information from these firsthand personal accounts and stories from members of the modern diaspora.
Nice. And then if you want to give us a summary of what you would want the general public to know about your research paper, what your conclusions were.
Sure. I mean, the overall title of my research paper focused a lot about digital imagined communities and diasporic identities. So I think we grouped it up into three empirical cases, talking about digital Tatris communities, DEBCA, performative culture on social media, and visual symbols that were used for digital resistance. So these three like empirical cases were methods that we use to kind of shine a light on how digital technology plays a central role um, in fostering unity, in forming diasporic communities and cultural identity. Um, I think we found that, yes, obviously, like including culture and integrating it in technology, which is so widely used, especially within the younger public who may, of Palestinians within the diaspora who may want to learn more about their culture. But we also found that, I also found that tensions between cultural preservation and um, kind of the amplification of it on social media kind of limited, I think, the effectiveness of some of this culture, which is sometimes a risk. You have hybridization of culture, you have, I think, the dilution of traditional messages and histories, which is sometimes apparent just when you have a very fast and widespread movement of culture suddenly swarming the internet. So I think we concluded that like these platforms on social media are essential for sustaining cultural identity within the diaspora, but also introduce some new vulnerabilities, which I think people producing these information must take into consideration.
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance. That's a very interesting research topic. Um, so just to shift into your general experience with CCIR, firstly, can you tell us what your experience was like in the program doing a high-level research project like this as a high school student?
I think that honestly, without like the introduction of CCIR, I wouldn't have gone into research at least until much, much later. It was my kind of first introduction of research of this very like analytical writing. Yes, in high school you do a lot of projects and long assessments and kind of writing that I think prepares you for projects like this. But there's a difference between like firsthand interaction with a professor who has a multitude of experiences. I know my professor, Dr. Anastasakis, had a lot of like past experience talking about diasporas and writing in research projects. So I know personally sometimes struggle with the nuances of writing in different formats. There's always kind of a bit of tweaks that you have to do. So I found that having that one-on-one information and direction really, really helped, especially with I think making sure that my ideas stayed there, like stayed, I think, and were presented effectively within the research, but also he highlighted the importance of making sure that it was understandable, of I think presenting nuanced ideas and delving deeper into what exactly is the heart of the issue that you're discussing, while making sure that you include the negative impacts of what you want to discuss, for example.
Yeah, I think it's such a benefit of the program to have such high level support and such dedicated support because, as you mentioned, writing a research paper is very different than a lot of the kind of general or traditional high school papers. Writing research is a very different beast. So it's really great that you're able to get that one-on-one experience. Um, and then in terms of, so you mentioned a bit about how your mentor guided you. Can you go into a little bit more depth to, let us know what your relationship was like? So for our programs, we really like to emphasize the aspect of mentorship as opposed to the traditional teacher, where our mentors don't just transfer information onto you, but really guide you through your own discoveries and learning process. Can you tell us what your experience was like with your mentor and your experience as you moved through the first teaching half of the course into the latter, more research-oriented half of the course?
I think that, I mean, my personal experience was that it was very, I think, helpful while going into to the beginning of talking about your research project, kind of being introduced to a lot of these topics and concepts. He was very open to introducing different aspects, to being very, and was very welcoming. And I think he highlighted a lot of different, important topics and structures that were essential to writing your own research paper. So in the beginning, we would, for example, discuss a lot of different, I think, issues or topics that I wanted to talk about. And then we would write some text on them and kind of think about what would fit in what research I was writing, what wouldn't, what I can keep for, I think, maybe a separate project. I know that my title, especially the concept of digital imagined communities, wasn't something that was introduced early. It was actually like very late into my research writing process. But with the help of my mentor, I was able to kind of hone the ideas about technology and about the Palestinian diaspora and talk about different meanings of terms, talk about which terms were essential, about how I could really effectively get my point across. And I think that process really helped, I think, like promote my own ideas and let me be more confident in my writing, especially because this is a very new concept, very new writing process. So the first half of teaching and kind of introducing it and finding my own style and honing my writing style to be better than it was um, from just, I think, high school instruction and teaching really did improve my writing, so that I found a big difference in the beginning and at the end of the program.
That's really great. And then just a few last questions about kind of the outcomes of the program. Do you think this course has given you any insights into your future? Has it maybe informed or shaped how you think of your path moving forward, either for uni or even for your career?
I think that it kind of shaped not really like what path I wanted to go to, but I think how I think about them. Like, for example, I've always wanted to kind of do the pathway of, I think, political science, of maybe law school, of kind of keeping that direction of humanities and social sciences open. But it's kind of allowed me to think more about the nuances of those topics. I think, like, for example, if I would want to do philosophy classes, if I would want to do stuff more about, I think, how communities are affected by technology, by modern media, by um, I think less talking about events and history, which was what I was kind of aimed towards in the start of grade 11. And I shifted more, I think, towards who these events really impact, talking more about the people themselves, about the communities, about I think like marginalized communities, which um, I think in university I will aim to shift more towards that, maybe even change my major. But I know that with myself, a lot of firsthand experience and application would change that. So I I do think it helped me be a bit more open about um, the future programs that I would like to take, kind of not be stuck in a bubble of what I think is easy or what is right or what most people consider to be better, but to think more about what I find to be nuanced and interesting, because in the end, that's what I'm going to thrive more with. And with this research project, it's kind of allowed me to um, kind of explore different topics that I would have never known about and different authors, which have introduced me to concepts which I really hope to explore further in university.
That's great. It really does kind of enable you to get a taste of what might be a good fit for you, what might not be before you get to university, which can be so beneficial. And then my last question for you, what would you say to someone who asked you what the value of doing a project or a program like this is, especially for a high school student?
I think I would tell them that there's a lot of value for you to just develop and grow, I think. Like I know that it has improved my writing, how I think about concepts and how I kind of translate that onto the page. Because sometimes you would kind of just write or talk a lot about a specific topic, um, I think overcomplicating it. But with this project, it helps, I think, focus your information on specific aspects, specific understanding, allowing you to have, I think, more nuanced discussions. And I mean, I know that personally with, for example, um my research, like just finding sources and finding information and what pieces of text and writing that I wanted to include and didn't want to include, that has really been like developed and been improved much more. I know that when I compare, for example, essays that are written early in high school compared to the end of high school, I focus much more on um, I think finding nuanced discussions and amplifying the information, kind of what they're talking about. And I think just overall having that, like this research opportunity with a mentor really opens up students to improve more and to be more, I think, confident with the process, to, I think, find more benefit in it, but also be think more open to these new and different discussions.
I think that's really great. It's wonderful to hear that that you feel like you've grown a lot academically, and also, like you said, opened up your mind to a lot of potential kind of different paths and opportunities for you in the future. So that brings us to the end of our interview. Thank you so much for chatting to me, and congratulations again on your nomination to our Spotlight series.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.